Necromancer of the Shadows. Let's begin. Chapter 1321 You Are Crazy, Part 2. So, is he ready to stop playing around and talk business? As Evan's words fell, Ashavor finally turned around, his bright yellow, beast-like eyes locking onto him. Almost instantly, Evan felt the temperature around him rise. Sweat began to pour down his forehead, and an unbearable heat pressed against his body. Though the intensity of the temperature was overwhelming, he didn't let it show on his face, maintaining the same lazy expression as he stared back at the old man. Ashavor scrutinized Evan in silence for a few seconds before finally speaking in a cold voice. You said you wanted to make a deal that could elevate our Phoenix clan to the top faction in the Frozen Monarchy Empire. What do you mean by that? Evan tilted his head slightly and responded in an indifferent tone. Why ask such a stupid question? Isn't it obvious? If you make a deal with me, your Phoenix clan will reach the top of the Frozen Monarchy Empire. Ashivor's eyes narrowed. Do you even understand the meaning behind your words? Evan smirked slightly and answered calmly. Doesn't it simply mean replacing the current top faction of the Frozen Monarchy Empire with your Phoenix clan? Hearing Evan's words, Ashivor's gaze darkened. So you do understand, he nodded slowly, a cold smile forming on his lips. Then tell me, how exactly do you plan on replacing the current ruling faction of the Frozen Monarchy with my Phoenix clan? Evan stood up from the bed, glancing at its burning edges before storing it back into his storage ring. It's actually quite simple, he said, dusting off his hands and locking eyes with Ashavor. We just need to completely destroy the current strongest faction of the Frozen Monarchy. Once they are gone, your Phoenix clan will naturally take their place. A suffocating silence fell over the volcanic region. Blaze and Ashavor both stared at Evan as if he had lost his mind and gone crazy. Blaze's eyes twitched violently. An overwhelming urge to turn around and flee surged within her. When he asked me to relay his message to the high-level members of the Phoenix clan, I thought he was proposing some kind of business deal that would benefit both sides. She swallowed hard, cold sweat forming on her forehead. But this guy, he actually wants to kill Winterclaw. She felt an immense sense of relief knowing that they were in a separate dimension controlled by her uncle. At the very least, no one outside this space could overhear them. If anyone else had been listening and word got out that they were plotting against Winterclaw, it would have immediately escalated into a massive crisis. Ashavor exhaled sharply and shook his head. After hearing about you from Blaze, I thought you were a smart young man with extraordinary talent. His expression turned ice cold. But it turns out you're nothing more than a lunatic. No, an idiot who doesn't understand how the world works. Blaze grimaced. She, too, was beginning to question her own judgment. Before coming here, she had told Ashavor that, although her cheap brother was a schemer who couldn't be trusted, it still wouldn't be a waste of time to at least meet him. After all, reaching mid-level rank 3 just a few months after the Tomb of the Ancient closed was an incredible feat. Damn it, I specifically told him not to mess around before coming here, but this bastard. She snuck a glance at Ashavor, whose expression was now eerily indifferent, as if he were already deciding what to do with Evan. Evan wasn't bothered in the slightest by Ashavor's reaction and simply waited for his next words. You do realize, Ashavor finally spoke, that plotting against the Emperor is treason. I can kill you right now. Or, I can hand you over to the royal guards and receive a generous reward for reporting a group conspiring to rebel against the Empire. Evan's gaze sharpened slightly. And how exactly would you inform the royal guards about me? He asked. His voice was calm, but an undercurrent of amusement ran through it. Since I dared to come here, you should already know that I am confident I can escape before you manage to alert that stupid ice beast and his people. For a moment, Ashavor froze. Then, his face darkened as a chilling light flickered in his eyes. Are you implying that a low-level core evolver like you can escape before I stop you? Without another word, a powerful aura erupted from Ashavor. The sheer force of his rank 5 core evolver pressure locked onto Evan and Sylvan. The ground beneath them cracked and trembled. Both their bodies sank slightly, struggling under the crushing weight of Ashavor's oppressive energy. Evan frowned, but before things could escalate further, a small, blue-colored bead appeared in his hand. As soon as the bead materialized, waves of blue energy rippled outward, instantly nullifying the overwhelming pressure. Seeing the bead, Ashivor's expression shifted. A flicker of shock crossed his face as he sensed the bead's energy. A faint but unmistakable breath of a rank 6 core evolver emanated from it, sending a tingling sensation down his spine. At the same time, another object, a formation plate, appeared in Evan's other hand, radiating powerful spatial fluctuations. "See," Evan said, a smirk playing on his lips. "I can activate this teleportation formation and leave this dimension anytime I want." His smirk widened. "So tell me, do you really think you can inform Winterclaw and his people about us before we vanish?" Ashshiver's eyes flickered as he quickly regained his composure, and spoke in a voice full of disdain. "All I need is to send a single message and my people inside the capital would take immediate action." 1 minute, he raised a finger. In just 1 minute, the entire Maldrith kingdom would go into full lockdown. Even with your teleportation formation, you wouldn't be able to escape. Hearing Ashshiver's words, Evan's gaze gleamed with an unreadable light. Instead of concern, an odd excitement flickered in his eyes. Ashshivor noticed the change and suddenly felt a strange sense of unease. Why does this brat look so excited instead of afraid? Though puzzled, Ashshivor still spoke coldly. "That's right," he confirmed. "I only need to send one mise." Mid-sentence, he suddenly froze and an inexplicable chill crawled down his spine. He felt the gaze of the crooked old man standing behind Evan land on him, and the next moment, his body stiffened. Chapter 13:22 You Were Lying, Right? Part 1. As Sylvan's aura locked onto him, Ashshivor felt a chill run down his spine, and his hair stood on end. The oppressive pressure he had been emitting to intimidate Evan was immediately swept away, and cold sweat began to trickle down his forehead. Something is wrong, that guy, he is definitely not a rank 3 core evolver. Ashshiver's mind screamed as he stared at Sylvan, whose piercing gaze was fixed on him, much like a lion eyeing an easy kill. Slowly, Ashshivor turned his head toward Evan, only to find him staring back with burning eyes as if he had just discovered a priceless treasure. What are you planning?" The old man instinctively took a step back, raising his hands to shield himself, as if afraid that Evan and Sylvan were about to do something unspeakable to him. Evan, however, paid no attention to Ashshiver's odd behavior and instead asked in a low voice. "How many people under Winterclaw's command are actually working for you?" Hearing this, Ashshiver's eyes widened and he realized something. Everything you did before was because of this." He stared at Evan in disbelief. Evan simply shrugged, spreading his hands as if stating the obvious. "What else did you think?" he asked, his voice calm. "Do you take me for an idiot, someone who would say something like that without considering the possibility that you might sell me out to Winterclaw?" The reason Evan had decided to involve the Phoenix clan in his plan to kill Winterclaw traced back to when he first met Blaze in the Dark Forest after returning from Earth. The Phoenix clan is located in the Eastern Territory, not far from the Frozen Monarchy Empire. Although he and Anastasia often referred to Winterclaw as a stupid ice beast, the truth is undeniable. Winterclaw is one of the strongest beings in Utopia, and killing him will be an incredibly difficult task. Not only does he have an entire empire with a massive army, but his own strength far exceeds that of an ordinary peak rank 6 core evolver. That is why, before taking action, Evan needed as much information as possible about Winterclaw. The Phoenix clan, which operates independently from the Empire, is the perfect source for gathering intelligence. Even though the Phoenix clan is not as powerful as it had once been, it is still strong enough to stand on its own, refusing to submit to the Frozen Monarchy Empire. And as a faction that has been resisting the Empire's rule, they are bound to have spies planted inside the Empire to monitor its movements, ensuring they will be forewarned if the Empire ever decides to move against them. If the Phoenix clan had merely been another regular faction outside the Empire's control, Evan would have approached them directly for cooperation. After all, as a faction constantly threatened by the Empire, even if they refused to actively participate in an attack against Winterclaw, they would likely have no objections to sharing whatever information they had about him and his army. However, the reason Evan chose not to be direct, the reason he acted as a low-level core evolver and allowed Ashshivor to take the lead, was because of what had happened to the Phoenix clan in the past. Once, the Phoenix clan had been one of the top factions in Utopia. Though not as powerful as the Dragon Islands, they were not far behind. But for some unknown reason, most of the Phoenix clan's members perished in a mysterious disaster, reducing their population to dangerously low levels. As a result, their power diminished significantly, and they could no longer be considered one of Utopia's top factions. Evan had searched through numerous books and even consulted Anastasia, Sylvan, and Alaric, hoping to uncover the truth behind the Phoenix clan's downfall. However, even ancient beings like Anastasia and Alaric knew nothing about what had happened or how the majority of the Phoenix clan's members had died. This led to only one logical conclusion. Someone had deliberately erased all records of the incident. And in the Eastern Territory, there is only one individual Evan can think of who has the power and influence to do something like that. Winterclaw. Of course, there is a small possibility that it has been the Phoenix clan itself that has suppressed information about the disaster. But Evan is far more inclined to believe that the incident is connected to Winterclaw. If his theory was correct, if Winterclaw truly was responsible for the massacre of the Phoenix clan, then there was a high chance that the survivors would not dare to cooperate with Evan, fearing the horrors of the past. And if that were the case, then the Phoenix clan would be of no use to him. His primary reason for pulling them into his plan was because he needed information about Winterclaw. If their fear had prevented them from even planting spies inside the Empire, then there was no reason to involve them, they simply wouldn't be useful. While it was true that the Phoenix clan still had some high-level core evolvers, Evan wasn't lacking in powerful allies. Ashavor had initially dismissed Evan as a mere rank 3 core evolver, assuming he had no means of escape. This overconfidence led him to admit that he had connections with certain individuals who worked under Winterclaw. To ensure Ashavor wasn't lying, Sylvan had even brought an artifact capable of detecting falsehoods. Earlier, when Ashavor revealed that he had spies inside the Empire, Sylvan had used the artifact and confirmed that he was telling the truth. Now that Evan was certain that the Phoenix clan had infiltrated the Empire, he felt that bringing them into his plans wouldn't be a waste of time after all. But more importantly, I really want to know what happened to the Phoenix clan in the past. Since coming to Utopia, every time Evan heard about a large-scale massacre that occurred in the past, the culprit behind it always seemed to be him. But this time, he had stumbled upon a massacre that had nothing to do with him. For the first time, he was faced with a large-scale slaughter that he had no connection to whatsoever. And the thought excited him. He needed, to uncover the truth as soon as possible. To prove, once and for all, that even without his involvement, large-scale massacres could still happen in Utopia. Chapter 1323 You Were Lying, Right? Part 2. What do you want? Ashavor asked, taking deep breaths to steady himself. I was careless, he thought inwardly, his gaze fixed on the recording Evan was playing. In the recording, his own voice rang out, admitting that he was in contact with several individuals working for Winterclaw. Although such a revelation wouldn't severely impact him or the Phoenix clan, Ashavor still did not want this recording to be seen by anyone, especially not by those affiliated with Winterclaw. The reason for this was simple: what had happened in the past. Just as Evan had suspected, the decline of the Phoenix clan and the death of many of its members had been directly tied to Winterclaw. If Evan were to send this recording to Winterclaw, that ice beast would have the perfect excuse to attack the Phoenix clan again. Evan studied Ashavor's expression carefully. Though the old man had tried to remain calm and composed, the brief flicker of panic in his eyes, when he had threatened him with the recording, did not escape his notice. Now I am even more certain that the Phoenix clan's tragedy is connected to Winterclaw. If it weren't, this old man wouldn't have panicked when I used the recording to threaten him. Evan didn't immediately respond to Ashavor's question. Instead, he turned to Sylvan and gave him a subtle nod. Before answering Ashavor, he needed to deliver one final blow, one that would ensure the old man would become more cooperative. Noticing Evan's signal, Sylvan stepped forward, and in an instant, his aura erupted, spreading across the entire volcanic region. A suffocating pressure descended upon Ashavor as the power of a nearly mid-level rank 6 core evolver shrouded the land. Ashavor's heart skipped a beat, and he sucked in a sharp breath. Earlier, when Sylvan had locked onto him, Ashavor had already suspected that this crooked-looking man was not just a rank 3 core evolver. However, even then, he had assumed that Sylvan was, at best, a peak rank 5 core evolver. But now, as the terrifying aura pressed down on him, Ashavor finally realized how wrong he had been. FCK, he is almost as strong as the clan leader, Ashavor cursed inwardly, gulping nervously. His eyes shifted toward his dear niece, the one who had suggested this meeting, claiming they should discuss cooperation with Evan and he had urged to beat her. Cooperation. This is outright bullying. Despite his panic, Ashavor couldn't help but think about Sylvan's behavior. A rank 6 core evolver behaving like a subordinate. His gaze landed on Evan, filled with suspicion. Just who is this guy? Evan, however, had no interest in Ashavor's thoughts. After confirming that Sylvan's aura had shaken the old man, he finally spoke. So, do you believe now that I wasn't joking earlier? Ashavor inhaled deeply, forcing himself to calm down and slowly nodded. Even if he still harbored doubts about Evan's claim of wanting to kill Winterclaw, he wasn't stupid enough to deny it outright, not right now. Evan knew this as well. So, with a calm voice, he continued. I know you still have many doubts. But once we have discussed everything, I can assure you, you won't be disappointed. Ashavor fell into a long silence, before finally taking another deep breath. Please, sit down, he said, gesturing with his hand. A moment later, 2 chairs formed behind Evan and Sylvan, crafted from lava. Evan looked at the chairs made from lava, his brows slightly raised. Does this old man want to set my butt on fire? Curious, he touched the chair with his hand and was surprised to find that it wasn't hot. Instead, it had a texture similar to soft, bouncy slime, rather than hardened lava. He bounced on the chair a few times, his mind momentarily drifting back to his time with Anastasia as she had taken out some similar items before. Tell me, what do you want to talk about? Evan snapped back to reality at the sound of Ashavor's voice and coughed lightly. Before we discuss cooperation, can I ask you a question? Ashavor raised an eyebrow but eventually nodded. Seeing his response, Evan tried to suppress the excitement bubbling in his chest and asked in a low voice. Can you tell me what happened in the past that nearly destroyed your Phoenix clan? The moment Evan's question left his lips, Ashavor's face darkened, and his fists clenched tightly. Blaze, too, was visibly surprised as even she didn't know what had happened in the past. She was still young, and many of the clan's secrets had been kept hidden from her. She had asked her father multiple times about the Phoenix clan's past, but the only answer she ever received was, "You don't need to worry about the past." Ashavor took another deep breath, his eyes turning slightly cold. Why do you ask this question? Of course, it's to prove that I am not behind every large-scale massacre in Utopia. Evan thought to himself, but naturally, he didn't say that out loud. Instead, he replied, because I know this matter is related to Winterclaw. And since we want to kill him, we need all the information we can get. Ashavor frowned, staring at Evan. How did he know? Everything about that incident had been meticulously erased. There was no way he should have been able to connect it to Winterclaw. He remained silent for a few moments before finally speaking in a low voice. This information won't help you in any way against Winterclaw. Evan shook his head, a serious expression appearing on his face. You won't know until you try. Who knows? The information you give me might end up being the most important key to killing him. Sylvan remained silent, simply watching Ashavor calmly, his gaze signaling that he, too, agreed with Evan. Ashavor glanced at his niece, silently pleading for her to stop her cheap brother from pressing this issue. But when he saw her eyes gleaming with curiosity, even more eager than Evan himself, his heart sank. She is hopeless, he sighed inwardly and finally spoke. Seeing Ashavor was about to speak, Evan's eyes lit up, and he leaned forward slightly, ears perked up in anticipation. But the moment the old man uttered his first sentence, Evan's expression froze. Everything that happened began with the appearance of the Shadow Monarch. Chapter 13:24 How do you know about the Realm Devourer? Everything that happened began with the appearance of the Shadow Monarch. The moment Ashavor's words fell, an eerie silence engulfed the entire volcanic region. Blaze was stunned at first, but then, her expression shifted into one of pure horror. The name Shadow Monarch carried an infamous reputation that spread throughout Utopia, a name synonymous with terror and destruction. Sylvan, on the other hand, looked visibly confused, feeling somewhat puzzled. Before they had arrived here, he had heard Evan repeatedly mentioning that during this trip, he would prove that large-scale massacres in Utopia could occur even without his involvement. At the time, Sylvan hadn't given it much thought. After all, during his long life, he had witnessed countless massacres that had nothing to do with the Shadow Monarch. It was just that none of them were as famous as the ones attributed to him. And since Evan hadn't been in Utopia for long, his knowledge was limited, so his assumption that most large-scale massacres were tied to him was understandable. Though Sylvan hadn't taken Evan's claim too seriously, he had been curious about what had happened to the Phoenix clan in the past. Now, coupling that curiosity with Ashiver's words, and remembering the smug look on Evan's face when he had told him he would prove his innocence, Sylvan couldn't help but shake his head. "What can I say, as expected from you, I guess." He said this while patting Evan on the shoulder, who stood frozen beside him. The sudden pat snapped Evan out of his daze, and his expression darkened. "What do you mean by, it all started with the appearance of the Shadow Monarch? Wasn't this incident caused by Winterclaw?" he asked in a low voice, trying his best to suppress his frustration at having his sweet dream shattered. Ashivor noticed that both Evan and Sylvan's expressions had turned odd after hearing his words. However, he couldn't figure out why, so he chose not to dwell on it. Instead, he continued, "You all should be aware of the most notorious event in the history of the Eastern Territory, right?" Evan simply stared at him, refusing to answer. He knew exactly what Ashivor was referring to, but he had no desire to acknowledge it. Sylvan also remained silent, deep in thought. However, when he glanced at Evan's expression, he chose not to speak either. Blaze, on the other hand, reacted with visible shock. Her eyes widened as a name slipped from her lips in disbelief. "Uncle, are you referring to Eternal Night?" She couldn't fathom how the Phoenix clan could be connected to that horrifying event. Ashivor nodded, letting out a bitter smile as he sighed. "Yes, it happened after Winterclaw was seriously injured and was forced to flee from Nyctopia." Evan, though greatly disappointed that the Phoenix clan's past was also tied to him, still listened carefully. According to Ashivor, when Winterclaw learned that the Shadow Monarch had attacked Nyctopia, a country under his empire's rule, he personally arrived to stop him. But instead, he was brutally beaten and left seriously injured. Forced to escape in hurry, Winterclaw fled in the direction of the Vortex Peaks, the place where the Phoenix clan resided. The Shadow Monarch didn't chase him, as his main targets were the Frost Wraiths who lived in Nyctopia. However, he did send a Shadow Undead after him. This Shadow Undead was at the peak of rank 6, and even among other peak rank 6 core evolvers, it was considered exceptionally strong. A peak rank 6 Shadow Undead. When Evan heard these words, he couldn't help but raise an eyebrow. Anastasia had mentioned a few powerful Shadow Undeads that resided within the Shadow Realm, such as Valtair, Florida, and a few others. But most of the strongest ones were still in deep sleep, and she hadn't told him much about them. Nor had he asked. However, she had once mentioned that there was a Shadow Undead in the Shadow Realm, one that was at the peak of rank 6. According to her, this Shadow Undead was not weaker than Eldrakar or the other top rank 6 core evolvers of Utopia. In fact, according to her, its potential was even greater than theirs, and if it ever fully matured, it could even rival the progenitors themselves. Evan's gaze hardened, and he asked in a soft voice, "The Shadow Undead you're talking about, is it the Shadow Undead of the Realm Devourer?" Ashiver's eyes widened slightly in surprise. "How do you know about the Realm Devourer?" "I just heard about it somewhere," Evan replied casually, shaking his head before gesturing for Ashivor to continue. He wasn't lying, his only knowledge of the Realm Devourer came from Anastasia, and even then, it was limited. Ashivor studied Evan for a moment but chose not to press the matter. Instead, he resumed his story. Winterclaw fought against the Shadow Undead while fleeing. When he reached the Vortex Peaks, he sought help from the Phoenix clan's leader at the time. Evan continued listening intently, though the more he heard, the stranger his expression became. According to Ashivor, the Phoenix clan's leader at the time was not weaker than Eldrakar. A battle between Winterclaw and a Shadow Undead of the Realm Devourer, two peak rank 6 core evolvers, was enough to devastate an area spanning millions of kilometers. Since the fight broke out in the Vortex Peaks, the Phoenix clan's leader had no choice but to step in. Even though he didn't want to, he knew that if he didn't act, the terrain surrounding their homeland would become uninhabitable. The core area of the Vortex Peaks was protected by a barrier, but with no time to prepare, many Phoenix clan members were caught in the crossfire of the battle. As a result, the high officials of the Phoenix clan were also forced to step forward. Evan's eyes narrowed, and after considering the situation, he spoke in a low voice. So, your leader decided to attack Winterclaw, but in the end, Winterclaw killed him and then massacred the other Phoenix clan members. That was the most logical conclusion Evan could reach based on the fact that Winterclaw was behind the massacre of Phoenix clan. But to his surprise, Ashavor shook his head and sighed. No, the leader and the high-ranking members of the Phoenix clan did not attack Winterclaw, they attacked the shadow undead of the Realm Devourer. Chapter 1325 The story behind the tragedy. No, the leader and the high-ranking members of the Phoenix clan did not attack Winterclaw, they attacked the shadow undead of the Realm Devourer. Hearing Ashivor's words, question marks seemed to appear above Evan's head, and for a moment, his heart skipped a beat. Don't tell me, the one who killed the Phoenix clan members wasn't Winterclaw, but the shadow undead of the Realm Devourer. He thought to himself, feeling a bit confused. If it was the Realm Devourer's shadow undead that had massacred the Phoenix clan, then how was Winterclaw involved in this tragedy? Seeing the puzzled look on Evan's face, Ashavor sighed before continuing. With the help of the Phoenix clan leader and many high-ranking Phoenixes, Winterclaw successfully killed the shadow undead of the Realm Devourer. However, Ashivor's expression darkened, his fists clenching tightly. The price of that victory was unbearably high. More than 10 rank 5 Phoenixes and 1 rank 6 Phoenix lost their lives in the battle. And all the others, including the leader himself, were left severely injured. Evan narrowed his eyes, already suspecting what must have happened next. During the battle, the wife of the Phoenix clan leader was also killed. Enraged, the leader blamed Winterclaw for everything. After all, it was because of him that the battle had taken place in their territory. Winterclaw had deliberately chosen to fight the Realm Devourer here, hoping to use the Phoenix clan to his advantage, and as a result, another fight broke out between your Phoenix clan's leader and Winterclaw. Evan finished the sentence for Ashavor. Ashavor paused for a moment before nodding. Winterclaw was already injured from his battle with the Shadow Monarch, and those injuries had only worsened during his fight against the Realm Devourer. With the help of the other high-ranking members of the Phoenix clan, our leader managed to push him into a desperate situation, and just when he was about to be killed. Ashavor suddenly stopped, his eyes flashing with a mix of anger and lingering fear. He took a deep breath, trying to calm himself, before speaking in a gloomy voice. Just when he was about to be killed, a strange power erupted from Winterclaw. Everyone present, including our leader and the high-ranking Phoenixes, was either instantly killed or left critically injured. The power spread across the entire Vortex Peaks, and only a few lucky ones, along with those who were inside the core area protected by the barrier, managed to survive. Evan and the others were stunned upon hearing Ashivor's words. A shocked look appeared on their faces. Instantly killing so many high-ranking core evolvers. Sylvan muttered, his expression turning serious. Evan, however, couldn't help but think of the primordial lowly. He already knew that both Valerie and Winterclaw were connected to her. They were both born from the source that Azeroth had severed from her. Could it be that the power Winterclaw used back then actually belonged to her? Or, more precisely, did he awaken memories related to the primordial lowly at that moment? As Evan reached this conclusion, he finally understood why this incident had been buried by Winterclaw. If he had truly awakened memories linked to the primordial lowly, then he must have also realized that Azeroth wasn't just any monarch, he was the same person who had severed his source. To avoid drawing Azeroth's attention, Winterclaw had no choice but to keep this event hidden. But this is only my speculation. It's also possible that the power he used had nothing to do with the primordial lowly. Maybe it was just Winterclaw's trump card, or some other kind of ability he had kept secret all this time. Evan sorted out his thoughts in a matter of seconds before looking at Ashavor. Did you or anyone else in your clan notice anything unusual when Winterclaw unleashed that power? Ashavor frowned, falling into deep thought. After a few moments, something came to mind, and he spoke in an uncertain tone. I am not entirely sure, but our clan leader, the one who was closest to Winterclaw when he used that attack, said that for a brief moment, he saw the phantom of a small girl appear behind him. Evan's eyes flashed sharply. This revelation confirmed his earlier suspicions. At the same time, he couldn't help but feel a bit puzzled. You said the clan leader was the one closest to Winterclaw and saw this phantom. But how do you know this? Wasn't he killed by the power Winterclaw released? Ashavor. shook his head. Most of the people were killed instantly, yes. But the leader, he didn't die right away. He was gravely injured and managed to survive for a few more hours before succumbing to his wounds. Evan's mouth twitched slightly at this revelation. With a strange look on his face, he asked, "So, you're telling me that Winterclaw severely injured him but didn't finish him off? He just let him live for a few more hours?" Ashavor sighed, shaking his head again. It wasn't that he let him live. He had no choice. After using that attack, Winterclaw was completely drained of his strength. If he had stayed, he would have been killed by the remaining Phoenix clan members who had survived inside the core area of the Vortex Peaks. So, he had no choice but to escape. Ashavor paused for a moment before adding, "That's also the reason why the Phoenix clan survived that day. If Winterclaw hadn't been so exhausted and had enough strength left to continue fighting, even those in the core area, including me, would have been wiped out." "I see," Evan nodded, his expression thoughtful. Still, he couldn't help but feel a little disheartened. In the end, this massacre was still somehow connected to Azeroth. He sighed deeply, feeling a sense of frustration settle over him. That guy really is my nightmare. Shaking his head, he took a deep breath, trying to clear his thoughts. But then, a strange thought suddenly crossed his mind. Wait, the primordial lowly is female, but Winterclaw is male. His eyes flickered with a strange light as his thoughts took an unexpected turn. If Winterclaw really did awaken memories of the primordial lowly, wouldn't he feel depressed about suddenly realizing that, in his past life, he was actually a girl? Chapter 13:26 The fish took the bait. Evan shook his head, dismissing the strange thoughts that had been flooding his mind, and stood up from the comfortable lava chair. Without batting an eye, he casually stored the chair inside his storage ring, acting as if nothing had happened. "Well, first of all, it's completely your fault for attacking an innocent shadow undead who was simply chasing its target. So, I'd say the Shadow Monarch is actually the innocent party here and has nothing to do with what happened in the past." He mercilessly criticized Phoenix clan actions, shifting the blame onto them while also trying to clear his, or, more precisely, Azeroth's, name. Ashavor opened his mouth to respond, but no words came out. He wanted to complain about many things, like how Evan had just stolen his chair in broad daylight and how he was criticizing them instead of blaming the shadow undead of the Realm Devourer for suddenly appearing in their territory. In the end, however, Ashavor simply shook his head and chose not to say anything. Seeing the old man remain silent, Evan took it as an unspoken agreement with his reasoning and nodded in satisfaction. Now that the trivial matters are out of the way, let's get back to business. His expression turned serious, and he spoke in a deep voice. "You have many people under your command who are active in the Frozen Monarchy, right?" Ashavor nodded, and it seemed he already knew what Evan was about to ask next because he spoke before Evan could continue. "You want to know the number of high-level core evolvers under Winterclaw's command and the structure of his army, correct?" He paused for a moment before taking out a crystal from his storage ring. "All the important information you need about Winterclaw is in this crystal. You can check it." Evan's eyes lit up with delight as he caught the crystal and immediately examined it with his spiritual sense. As he scanned the crystal, he discovered that it contained a lot of information, including details about the secret passages within the capital of the Frozen Monarchy. There was also data on the individuals serving under Winterclaw's command, but Evan didn't check that information just yet. After briefly scanning through the contents, he put the crystal away and asked, "How accurate is this information?" Ashavor thought for a moment before he replied. "This information was gathered over many years, so most of it should be accurate. However," he hesitated for a moment before continuing, "you should know that Winterclaw would never reveal the full extent of his power. There are definitely things hidden, secrets that no one, not even us, knows about." Evan fell silent, thinking about Mithranor, whom Anastasia suspected of being affiliated with Winterclaw. After a few moments, he suddenly asked, "Have you received any recent news about a powerful elf visiting Winterclaw?" Ashavor raised an eyebrow before shaking his head. "I don't know. I receive information from my people at the end of each month, and there are still a few days left before they send me their next report. But if you want, I can contact them later and let you know." Evan nodded and spoke seriously. "If they confirm the presence of an elf, tell them to stay away from him." Ashavor was confused by Evan's words. He wondered if the elf in question was Illustraea or someone from the Elven Empire. However, he chose not to ask any further questions and simply nodded. Then, as if something just occurred to him, Evan turned to Ashavor and asked, "By the way, is your Phoenix clan planning to participate in the fight against Winterclaw?" Even though Evan already knew the answer, he still asked, because he had a plan to drag them onto his pirate ship. Just as expected, Ashavor shook his head without hesitation and spoke firmly. "We have no intention of getting involved in this mess. The best I can do is provide you with information, but only under the condition that we won't be implicated in this conflict in any way." Evan wasn't surprised by this response and simply shook his head with a regretful expression. "Is that so? What a pity." Seeing the disappointed look on Evan's face, Ashavor's mouth twitched. This guy is acting like they are already guaranteed to kill Winterclaw. Evan shifted his gaze toward his cheap sister, who had been standing off to the side, her expression blank as she tried to process the absurd series of events that had just taken place. A smirk formed on his lips as he spoke. "Sister, do you want to come with me and burn Winterclaw's people to ashes? I am sure your ancestors would be proud of you for killing those who serve that beast." Blaze snapped back to reality at Evan's words and stared at him dumbfoundedly. She was definitely tempted to witness such a massive battle firsthand. But at the same time, she knew that going anywhere with her cheap brother was no different from selling her soul to the King of Hell. If she followed him, she would die without even knowing how. She was about to refuse, but before she could say anything, Evan's next sentence stopped her in her tracks. "If you are afraid that Winterclaw will target you specifically because you are from the Phoenix clan, don't worry. To him, you're nothing more than a bug, no, wait, a chicken." He paused for a moment before continuing, smirking mischievously. "Besides, he won't even have time to command his army, he will be too busy dealing with a powerful opponent." Blaze's fist clenched tightly, and she looked at Evan with a forced smile. She really wanted to give him a dropkick for calling her a chicken, but alas, what could she do? Her rank was lower than his, and if she tried anything, she would be rubbed to the ground without even being able to put up a fight. Taking a deep breath to calm herself, she asked in a low voice, "Who are you talking about?" The fish took the bait. Evan's smile widened slightly, and half an hour later, he walked out of the separate dimension with a villainous smirk on his face. Chapter 1327 Raining Blood Part 1. Evan and Sylvan left the shabby restaurant and once again found themselves in the bustling market street. Sylvan's crooked eyes were wide open, his mind still reeling from what Evan had just told Blaze and Ashavor. "When did she join your pirate ship? And why don't I have any information about it?" he asked in a low voice, wary of others overhearing their conversation. Evan, however, paid no attention to the vendors and pedestrians around them, who were eyeing the two of them as if they were a pair of street thugs, and answered casually, "I also just found out a few days ago. Anastasia was the one who told me about it. Damn, the 10 years I spent inside Anastasia's core world really messed up my perception of time. I need to remember that only a few days have passed in the outside world." Evan sighed at the thought and continued, "When she told me, I asked her how she managed to convince Illustraea to join our pirate ship, but no matter how many times I asked her, she wouldn't tell me. She just said she paid a very high price to persuade that madwoman and that I need to pamper her as repayment." "You really didn't need to say that last part," Sylvan muttered, shaking his head before asking seriously, "Are you sure she will fight Winterclaw with us? I don't mind you fooling around, but Ashavor only agreed to join us because he believed Illustraea would fight alongside us. If she doesn't show up, it'll cause a huge problem for us later." Evan nodded calmly. "Since Anastasia said that madwoman will come, then, even if she doesn't want to, she will have to." Sylvan's mouth twitched at Evan's words. He couldn't help but feel that both Evan and Anastasia were completely unreasonable, forcing people into things they don't want to do. In a way, they are both shameless bastards, a perfect match for each other. With that thought, he decided to push the matter aside and asked, "So, are we heading back now?" Evan remained silent for a moment before taking out the crystal that Ashavor had given him earlier. The crystal contained a lot of information about Winterclaw and those connected to him. Evan scanned through it with his spiritual sense and, after a few moments, put it away. Since this is my first time visiting the frozen monarchy after coming to Utopia, wouldn't it be rude if I left without giving Winterclaw a little gift? A slight smirk formed on his lips as he glanced at Sylvan. Sylvan's expression shifted immediately. "What are you planning?" he asked in a serious voice. Evan chuckled lightly before responding. "Let's go pay a visit to the king of Maldrith Kingdom. I heard he is very loyal to Winterclaw." Sylvan's expression darkened as he quickly stepped in front of Evan to stop him. "Don't be reckless," he warned. "Right now is a critical time for us. We need to prepare for the upcoming battle. If you make a move here, it will alert Winterclaw, and that could affect our entire plan to attack him in a few months." Evan stopped walking and looked at Sylvan calmly. He already knows we're coming for him. Huh? Sylvan blinked in confusion, staring at Evan. Evan didn't explain further and simply resumed walking toward his destination. "Even if we don't do anything here, he will still be prepared for our attack," he said as he walked. Sylvan quickly followed after him, his confusion deepening. "What are you trying to say?" Evan remained silent for a moment, his eyes narrowing as his thoughts drifted back to Mithranor, the one whom he and Anastasia had deliberately kept a secret from everyone. Now that they knew Mithranor was working with Winterclaw, and that his essence clone had been on Earth, Evan could safely assume that Mithranor knew about Valerie's true identity, that she was one of the beings born from the source of the primordial lowly. Since Mithranor's essence clone had been on Earth, it was highly likely that he had already deduced what had happened. Even though Evan had erased Mithranor's essence clone with the Null Eye, preventing it from transmitting any memories back, Mithranor was no fool. With the power levels on Earth being far lower than his, it wouldn't be difficult for Mithranor to conclude that Evan was the only one capable of destroying his essence clone. Since Mithranor could infer that Evan had destroyed the clone and taken Valerie to Utopia, he could also predict that Evan would inevitably come after Winterclaw, since doing so was the only way to help Valerie complete her source. And if Mithranor had already figured that out, then there was no reason for him not to share that information with Winterclaw. On top of that, Anastasia had hidden Valerie's location using her abilities, ensuring that not even Winterclaw would be able to find her despite them sharing the same source. Considering Winterclaw's power, it wouldn't be difficult for him to deduce that, in all of Utopia, only Anastasia possessed the ability to hide something from him. Connecting all the dots, both Winterclaw and Mithranor could easily guess that Evan and Anastasia were already preparing to strike. Since he most likely already knows what we are planning, it wouldn't hurt to give him an early gift. A cold glint flickered in Evan's eyes and he took a deep breath. There was also another reason he had decided to act now. He needed the bodies of rank 4 core evolvers to experiment with the rune of absorption. If his theory was correct, he might be able to increase his rank using them. Sylvan silently followed behind, sighing when he realized Evan had no intention of answering his questions. All he could do was hope that Evan wouldn't go too far this time. The Maldrith Kingdom was quite large, but with Evan's void abilities, it only took them a few hours to reach their destination. As the setting sun cast its hazy orange glow over the distant horizon, Evan gazed at the grand castle before him. The massive structure was bathed in the golden light of dusk, creating an aura of power and majesty. Evan stared at the castle for a few seconds before he took a step forward and appeared high above the castle. Chapter 1328 Raining Blood Part 2. High in the sky, a bald man wearing a monk's robe and holding Buddhist beads stood calmly. The bald monk was, of course, Evan, who had once again changed his appearance before causing trouble in the Maldrith Kingdom. The reason he altered his appearance was because he had just met Blaze and Ashavor. If he immediately began making trouble right after meeting them, it would undoubtedly create complications for them later on. So, in order to not to cause trouble for them, he simply became a monk whose sole agenda of living was to promote peace all over the world. Standing high in the sky, Evan idly played with the beads in his hand, a peaceful expression on his face as he watched the guards of the castle rushing out the moment he appeared above it. As the residence of the Maldrith Kingdom's king, the castle was unsurprisingly protected by hundreds of different kinds of security formations. As a result, the moment he showed himself above the castle, all the guards received the warning of an intruder and became highly alert. Sylvan, who was standing far away from Evan, hidden from the sight of everyone, sighed when he saw the chaos unfolding inside the castle. "If you wanted to make a big move, you should have just gone in silently," he muttered to himself, already feeling a headache forming. Why alert the whole village that you are here to rob them? The king of Maldrith Kingdom was a mid-level rank 5 core evolver. Under the command of the Frozen Monarchy, there are dozens of different kingdoms, and most of their rulers are rank 5 or rank 4 core evolvers. There are also a few powerful kingdoms ruled by rank 6 core evolvers, and these are the strongest vassal states under the Frozen Monarchy's rule. Among all of these kingdoms, Maldrith Kingdom is considered upper middle tier in power. As one of the strongest kingdoms in this upper middle level, the guards of Maldrith Castle reacted with astonishing speed. The moment the intruder alert was triggered, the captain of the guards, who was responsible for the patrolling and security of the outer castle, quickly evaluated the threat. The captain, a man named Brommel, was a mid-level rank 4 core evolver, so when he sensed Evan's beginner rank 4 aura, he was momentarily stunned and wondered where this fool had come from. Although he was surprised, Brommel did not immediately launch an attack nor activate any of the castle's defensive formations as he was still uncertain about Evan's true identity. Moreover, considering Evan was only at the beginner level of rank 4, Brommel did not believe he could pose much of a threat. After all, he himself was a mid-level rank 4 core evolver, and he was accompanied by numerous guards. Without any hesitation, Brommel soared into the sky, stopping at a distance of about 1,000 meters from Evan. At this carefully calculated distance, Brommel was confident that he could react in time even if Evan suddenly attacked. Brommel carefully observed the bald man in strange monk's robes, but no matter how much he studied his appearance, he could not recognize him. However, seeing how calm the bald monk remained even when facing an opponent of higher rank, Brommel did not dare to lower his guard. He decided to act with caution and shouted in a loud, commanding voice. "This is the private territory of Lord Martin. Outsiders are not permitted to enter without explicit permission. Identify yourself at once or IWI. You are causing sound pollution, donor." Before Brommel could even finish his sentence, Evan cut him off. "This poor monk has traveled from the other side of the ocean to exchange cultural ideas with your lord." Brommel. A series of question marks appeared above Brommel's head. Donor. Other side of the ocean. Exchange cultural ideas. Evan paid no attention to Brommel's bewildered expression and clapped his hands together. "Donor, please lead the way and take this poor monk to see your lord. See your sister." Black lines formed on Brommel's forehead, and he pointed his spear at Evan, his expression turning cold and serious. "I don't know what nonsense you are spouting, but if you refuse to identify yourself and state your purpose clearly, I will have no choice but to take action." Evan sighed at Brommel's firm stance and shook his head slightly. "Why must you bully a poor monk like me?" he lamented. "I only wish to advocate peace and share the beauty of cultural exchange across the world." His voice carried an air of sorrow, and his pained expression made it seem as if he was deeply hurt by Brommel's lack of understanding. However, Brommel had no patience for Evan's theatrics. A murderous glint flickered in his eyes, and the tip of his spear crackled with dark purple lightning. In less than 0.001 seconds, he hurled his spear like a javelin, sending it hurtling toward Evan. The attack was so fast that even before the spear reached him, Evan felt a sharp, piercing sensation at his temples. Alas, this poor monk only wanted to be a good person, spreading the beauty of peace across the world without harming anyone. As he spoke, the space around him rippled as though a stone had been thrown into a still lake. "But it seems that to achieve my mission, I must first eliminate those who bring chaos to the world and know nothing of peace." The moment he finished speaking, the space in front of him shattered, and the spear that had been mere inches from his face was suddenly swallowed by a void rift. "What?" Brommel's eyes widened in shock, and he instinctively tried to recall his spear, but before he could. Shadow World. A low, ominous voice rang into his ears, and in the next moment, everything, including the Grand Castle, was engulfed by an all-consuming pitch-black dome. A bone-chilling cold spread through the entire area trapped within the Shadow World, and the instincts of everyone inside screamed in pure terror. Boom, boom, boom. One by one, powerful auras erupted from within the castle, and in an instant, all high-ranking core evolvers present, including the king, appeared beside Brommel. Evan gazed at the gathered powerhouses who were staring at him coldly, and with a slight bow, he spoke. "Donors, all of your souls are stained with the blood of the innocent." As his voice echoed through the darkness, a pitch-black void rift appeared behind him, releasing an aura of raw chaos that seemed to come from the deepest, most forgotten parts of the void. With a calm expression, Evan activated Voidborn Invocation, a skill he had acquired after becoming a rank 3 core evolver. To purify your souls, I have no choice but to summon the true Apostle of Peace, to bring tranquility to the entire world. The moment Evan finished speaking, the void rift behind him shattered, and from within its endless abyss, two deep orange eyes slowly opened, eyes that looked like those of a starving, primordial beast. Those ominous, burning eyes locked onto Brommel and the others, filled with nothing but endless hunger. Voidborn Invocation. Upon usage, summons an entity from the deepest and the forgotten part of the void, a being of nothingness that devours all life and energies around it. The creature is unstable and exists temporarily, feeding on everything in its path. It obeys the caster, but its presence harms reality. The level of the summoned creature depends on the caster's level. This skill can be used once every month. Chapter 1329 Raining Blood Part 3. Voidborn Invocation. Upon usage, summons an entity from the deepest and most forgotten part of the void, a being of nothingness that devours all life and energy around it. The creature is unstable and exists temporarily, feeding on everything in its path. It obeys the caster, but its presence harms reality. The level of the summoned creature depends on the caster's level. This skill can be used once every month. When Evan had broken through to rank 3 in the Azragoth world, he had received the Voidborn Invocation skill due to the influence of his ruler's authority. Chap. 1140. Even now, his ruler's authority, Soul Keeper, wasn't fully unlocked and had only reacted once, when he revived Carla. Because of the somewhat terrifying description of the Voidborn Invocation skill and the unusual circumstances under which he had acquired it, he had never used it before. But now that he was a rank 4 core evolver, and his actual strength far exceeded his rank, he had enough confidence that even if something were to go wrong after using this skill, he would be able to handle it. Evan looked at the people who appeared after he used Shadow World, and his eyes fell on the only rank 5 core evolver among them. The king of Maldrith Kingdom was a middle-aged man named Gustav who had an imposing mustache and a third eye at the center of his forehead. This mid-level rank 5 king was a close confidant of Winterclaw, and according to the information Evan had received from Ashavor, he had once served as a commander in Winterclaw's army. About 50 years ago, the previous king of Maldrith Kingdom had done something that angered Winterclaw, and as a result, he was killed by Gustav. After Gustav eliminated him, Winterclaw had made him the new ruler of the kingdom. If Evan had to summarize everything in simple words, then Gustav was nothing more than a thug, sent to Maldrith Kingdom by Winterclaw to gather all of its resources and send them to him. After learning all the details about Gustav, Evan was sure that when he eventually attacks Winterclaw, this man, like a loyal dog returning to its owner, will definitely fight on Winterclaw's side. Rank 5 core evolvers are rare across the entirety of Utopia, and killing one, along with the many rank 4 core evolvers working under Gustav, will undoubtedly cause Winterclaw great pain. As Gustav, Brommel, and the other rank 4, rank 3 core evolvers and other guards appeared in the sky, all of them instantly felt a strange dullness in their minds, as if something was eating, no. Not eating, but erasing their very souls and memories. A cold sweat broke out over their bodies as they immediately activated their conceptual energy or law power to resist the strange sensation. The high-level core evolvers were the first to react, instinctively lowering their heads, unwilling to even glance at the void rift behind Evan, where the two deep orange eyes had just opened. Who are you? And why are you attacking? Gustav had just begun to speak when his words were suddenly cut short. Because in that very moment, the being inside the void rift stepped out. A wave of horror spread through the air as goosebumps rose on everyone's bodies. The guards, the core evolvers, and even Gustav himself felt a deep, primal fear as they stared at the strange entity, its hungry eyes fixed upon them. The creature's body was similar to a gorilla, walking on all fours, but its face was humanoid, a withered, dried-up visage that resembled an old woman, as though every drop of blood had been drained from its skin. Dark bone spurs sprouted from its deep purple fur, while an endless, chaotic energy, a fusion of the void's abyssal power and the very essence of nothingness, which sought to erase all existence, radiated from its terrifying form. Evan tilted his head slightly, his eyes scanning the nearly 100-meter-tall being standing behind him. For a moment, even he was taken aback by its intimidating appearance, especially its grotesque, humanoid face, which looked all the more unsettling because of its gorilla-like body. But what unsettled him the most was that the creature did not even glance at him, the one who had summoned it. Instead, its ravenous eyes were locked onto Gustav and the thousands of lower-level core evolvers standing behind him. Then, suddenly, a creepy smile spread across its dried, hollow face and it opened its mouth. A deep chill gripped the souls of Gustav and the other high-ranking core evolvers, their instincts screaming in sheer terror, as though their very existence was being threatened. Quickly, move away. Gustav roared in fear, his body shifting positions in an instant. The other high-ranking core evolvers also reacted immediately, scattering in all directions. However, the lower-level guards and even a few rank 3 core evolvers were too slow. Before they could even begin to flee, the monstrous being behind Evan simply closed its mouth, as if taking a bite. Swish! The moment its mouth shut, everything in front of Evan, including the people, the space itself was simply gone. It was as if it had never existed. All that remained in its place was endless darkness. Evan's eyes widened in disbelief, a chill creeping up his spine. A being of nothingness that devours all life and energies around it. The creature is unstable and exists temporarily, feeding on everything in its path. It obeys the caster, but its presence harms reality. The words from the skill's description echoed in his mind. And then he recalled something else, the reason he had acquired this ability in the first place. Ruler's authority. I received this skill due to the influence of my ruler's authority. When I revived Carla, my ruler's authority had activated on its own and it seems to have an intrinsic connection to the aspects of soul, time, and space. A realization dawned upon Evan, and he slowly raised a hand to cover his expression as a gleam of understanding flickered in his eyes. So, that's how it is. I finally understand why I received that notification informing me that I can evolve my conceptual energy of void into conceptual energy of nothingness after fully unlocking my ruler's authority. Chapter 1330 Raining Blood Part 4. Material space and void space are two fundamental aspects of existence that are intrinsically dependent on each other. Without the existence of material space, void space cannot exist. Conversely, without void space, material space would be unable to repair itself when damaged by external forces. For example, if someone were to exert an immense force to shatter material space, a void rift would appear, leading into void space. However, without material space, it would be impossible to open a void rift or access void space, as the very existence of void space is entirely dependent on material space. When the tomb of the ancient collapsed due to the overwhelming aftermath of Azeroth, Eldrakkar, and Baphomet's appearance, its void space was also obliterated, devoured by nothingness. The destruction of the tomb was the very reason why Azeroth had thrown Baphomet and Eldrakkar into its void space. As the tomb crumbled and its material space ceased to exist, its void space also ceased to exist, making it nearly impossible for even Eldrakkar, a void dragon, to escape. For him to escape, he needed to open a void rift leading to the material space of Utopia. However, with the complete destruction of the tomb's material space, its void space was consumed by nothingness. And within nothingness, it was utterly impossible to create a void rift or escape. Just as void space relies on material space also depends on void space. Without the presence of void space, whenever material space is damaged, it would be immediately devoured by nothingness. Only due to the existence of void space can the laws of the world repair the damaged material space before it is swallowed by nothingness. Now that Evan had become a rank 4 core evolver, he was able to wield a portion of void law. However, even with this power, he had no means of completely annihilating material space to the point that it would be consumed by nothingness. To achieve such a feat, he wouldn't just have to obliterate both material space and void space, but he would also need to destroy the very rules that shape the world, the fundamental laws that immediately activate whenever an unexpected event, such as space break, occurs. The moment space break happens, the laws of the world instantly begin repairing it to prevent damage to reality. Even for a peak rank 6 core evolver, causing damage to reality itself is an extraordinarily difficult task, as the rules of the world are immensely powerful. High-level core evolvers are capable of causing catastrophic devastation over vast areas, spanning millions of kilometers. However, given enough time, the world would gradually repair all damage. The destruction caused by such powerful beings may take tens, thousands, or even millions of years to be restored, but eventually, the world will repair itself. Yet, the entity Evan had summoned was merely at the peak of rank 4, far weaker than even a powerful peak rank 5 core evolver, let alone a rank 6. However, it's fucking insane. These were the only words Sylvan could utter as he stared in sheer disbelief at the ruined space before Evan. When the strange entity that Evan summoned had closed its mouth, as if merely taking a bite, it didn't just destroy material and void space, it had also annihilated the fundamental laws of the world. In simpler terms, the dark expanse before Evan was now flooded with the concept of nothingness, as if the space, the core evolvers, and everything else that once existed there had been erased from reality itself. Even a peak rank 6 core evolver would struggle to accomplish such a thing, making the shock that Sylvan felt even greater than when he had first met Evan. Who? No. What in the world is that thing? Sylvan's voice trembled as he gazed upon the nearly 100-meter-tall gorilla-like creature with its disturbingly withered old woman's face. A chilling shudder coursed down his spine. Like Sylvan, Evan too was in a state of shock. However, the reason behind Evan's shock was completely different. Unlike Sylvan, who was reeling from the sheer destruction he had witnessed, Evan had just realized something truly insane about his ruler's authority. No, I need to speak with Anastasia to confirm my suspicion. Evan tried to steady his racing heart, but no matter how much he attempted to suppress it, the realization that had just dawned upon him was simply too overwhelming. He turned his gaze toward the creature standing behind him, its monstrous grin spreading like a demon's, as a storm of thoughts surged through his mind. Especially certain details regarding his skill, Voidborn Invocation. Summons an entity from the deepest and most forgotten part of the void. The creature is unstable and exists temporarily. Its presence harms reality. He muttered about a few details of the skill inwardly. But the part that struck him the most. Deepest and most forgotten part of the void. Even back when he first obtained the Voidborn Invocation skill after breaking through to rank 3, he had felt as though he had encountered these words before. Yet, no matter how hard he tried, he could not recall where he had heard them. He still couldn't remember, though he suspected these words were related to Azeroth. But as he pondered over the insane realization that had just emerged in his mind, he knew he was on the verge of uncovering something crucial. I was planning to toy with these people for a while and test my newfound strength after reaching rank 4, but now, I just want to return and talk to Anastasia. Evan's eyes flashed coldly as he shifted his gaze toward Gustav and the nearly 1,000 survivors who had narrowly escaped the entity's attack. Slowly, his shadow began to move, expanding mid-air like a black carpet and merging seamlessly with the pitch-black walls of the shadow world that had enclosed everyone. And then, tear them apart. As Evan's chilling command echoed through the air, countless deep purple, burning eyes snapped open across the enclosed, blackened walls of the shadow world. The end. Your feedback is appreciated. If you